some people do avoid the ads. The vast majority of the average consumer doesn't avoid them and they just click on them. They don't care that they're an ad necessarily, or sometimes even realise that they're an ad.
Threads. Remember Threads?
So like it's become more of a capable thing, whereas before the difference was vast.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
The gap was huge, and that gap's like shrunk from a power perspective.
Google Ads can be a really competitive space, especially in certain industries. How do companies know that it's a worthwhile strategy, and how can they maximise their budget and reduce wastage?
So it's rare that it isn't a good idea, which of course I would say that because that's what I do. But I think if you do searches for things that you would look for if you were to look for the service or product that you are selling, and you see other people doing ads for it, then it's worth doing, because ultimately if you don't do it, someone else is going to do it and they're just going to appear on top of you. And although some people do avoid the ads, the vast majority of the average consumer doesn't avoid them and they just click on them. They don't care that they're an ad necessarily, or sometimes even realise that they're an ad. So if you're not doing it, someone else will, and they will take potential traffic away from you. So generally I would say it is worth doing, but it does ultimately depend on your budgets and your priorities as a business, and maybe there's other areas of marketing that are kind of more needed, more of a priority. But and it varies per sector as well as to what is kind of priorities in terms of marketing. But yeah, I think generally most people can use it. Obviously that's Google's intention, is that's what they want, isn't it? Ultimately they're an advertising company and they've built this search engine to sell ads on, and they're only going to keep going further in that direction as well. So I see the ads have already gone from having like 2 at the top to 4 at the top, and they're already getting bigger and they're already becoming less and less obvious. I think it'll just continue to go that way. So it generally is worth it, unfortunately. And in terms of maximising your budget on there, it really is just about refining what you're doing, and that can be difficult if you don't know what you're doing. And Google will makes ads as easy as they can to get as many people on as possible. They've done various initiatives. They used to have smart ads, I think it was called, which is basically ads for dummies. Like you literally just put in a few keywords and your website link, and it just does everything. But the problem with that is it really does just waste money. And they've gone away from that now, but they still have like a version of that. So if you're just an average user that sets it up for the very first time, you will be presented with that version of Google Ads, and you have to switch to expert mode to actually have the full control. And it's only within there that you can kind of drill things down a lot further and reduce, like, cut away things that you don't want. So in terms of reducing wastage, that is the way to do it, is to hit your target market, make sure you're hitting the area that you actually want to hit. Make sure your keywords are correct, make sure you're not going too broad. It's a very, very common thing for people where they're like, say they're doing say you're doing marketing, and as a marketing agency, you're advertising marketing, and someone just puts in as a keyword marketing, like it's just way too broad. It would just bring in too much crap. Definitely. It needs to be as specific as possible. Things are going more broad now. So it used to be all about being really like hyper targeted throughout the ads industry in general, and now things are going more like algorithm based, broad based. But you still need to feed it the correct information. So you need to be like marketing agency, SEO services, ads services, that you need those kind of things, or topics that people are actually searching for.
Yeah, so like usually in like a question form. So people are searching, they don't just put words in, or they can do, and it still comes up, but it's people usually type in a question, don't they?
Or something more
more specific.
So people type in like all sorts, like really long sentences and stuff like that. So being as targeted as you can within the bounds of still going broad enough is a good way to make sure you're not pissing away money.
And how do people know that they're doing it right then? Or how do they know that they're doing it wrong? Because it can be quite confusing for people that don't have a lot of experience.
Yeah, it is, and there's no real like easy way around it. The best way is to have like tracking set up, but setting up tracking is like quite an advanced job in itself. It's like there's tools to make things easy, you know, like Shopify. If you've got a Shopify site, you just drop in, you know, a few bits and it does the work for you, that kind of thing. So there is a lot of site builders do have things that integrate with Google Ads and try and you connect your accounts and it sets them all up for you basically. So that makes things easier, but having tracking is essential. You have to have tracking. If you're doing ads without tracking, then you literally just pissing in the wind. You don't know where it's going. So you have to track, and then you can see what's actually working, what isn't. Tracking, some tracking is better than no tracking. It's really common as well for people to put tracking on like pages. So like when someone's visited a contact page, for example, or a product page or something like that, that's very common. But realistically, loads of people hit the contact page but don't actually contact you or don't fill it out, you know. So it's better than nothing, but the more tracking you can have, the more points along the way, the better. And then even better than that, if you can add values to those tracking points as well, that helps a lot, because then Google knows like this lead or this like a purchase is worth this much, whereas this conversion event is only worth, you know, next to nothing because it's a very light lead. That's maybe not going to pay
I think
off.
it takes time as well, doesn't it? It's like it's a very test and learn tool. And I don't think a lot of companies realise that it's just obviously I think there's always going to be some level of like instant sort of uplift potentially, but generally it usually happens over time. It's not gonna like just miraculously bring in all these leads and convert just like that, is it?
No, it can,
yeah,
but it's rare. The best jobs that we've done are the ones that we've been doing for years, where we've got years of data on it. We've been refining it, and then now it's just really churning, and where you're still tweaking it because the ad landscape just keeps changing, and the tools available change, and the way you do things change. So you have to keep on top of it. But those ones where we have so much data behind us means Google has that data, we have that data, Microsoft has the data, whoever it is you're advertising with. You can refine it and optimize it much better over time. People are naturally impatient, and people want results really fast, and realistically, if you make a major change, you need to allow Google, Microsoft, Facebook, whoever it is, you need to allow weeks for that to even like start kicking in. So you need really months of kind of refinement at the very least to know whether something's working or not.
And I guess with companies that don't have a large budget, that can be quite problematic.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. It is risky. It is a risk, but it's just making sure you do things right from the beginning, as much to your knowledge as you can. Have your tracking in place. Make sure your targeting's correct. Make sure your keywords are actually, you know, good keywords, and keep an eye on it over time, because you can see when things are spending money on things you don't want. So it's just. It's keeping a constant eye on it and a constant grasp on it. And
I suppose, is it something that, you know, every sort of company needs a PPC person or a paid search person to just be spending all day on it? I mean, I suppose it depends on how that Google Ads fits within their strategy, but, you know, is it something that they can kind of just, you know, do every few months? Or obviously I know the answer's no to that, but you know, just tell me about that, because I think sometimes people just think, oh yeah, we'll have a little play around with it as though that's going to be going to work, but it needs more than that, obviously, doesn't it? It
needs like regularly looking at every week or two. I would say you need to keep tabs on things, especially every few weeks, because if you just leave things, it can run in the wrong direction. Google automatically, when you set up a new account, will leave all the like things on where it can change things for you, and it will do that. And I would say 8 times out of 10 the things it's changing are maybe not within your best interest. They might spend more money, but they're maybe not actually going to get you the most efficient use of spend. So for one, I would turn those all off straight away, but I'm obviously managing it, and it does have a purpose for people that don't manage it as closely as we do, that at least someone's doing something on the account to get rid of things that aren't working and move things in the right direction. So there is a purpose for the automated kind of bits and bobs, but they can also be quite dangerous as well. So I would say, like, as long as you're looking at it every few weeks, it doesn't need to be someone's daily job where they're looking at it all the time. It depends on your budget, it depends on your business size. If you're spending hundreds and hundreds of thousands, of course, you need to be constantly looking at it, multiple people looking at it all day, every day. But if you're spending a few £100 here and there, then
it doesn't warrant that.
It doesn't need that, but it does need to still be kept an eye on, otherwise it's just going to waste money.
Yeah.
And we've seen it loads of times where clients have maybe got accounts that they've not been looking at for the past 6 months or something like that, 8 months, and Google's just turned all sorts of dials on and off and dynamic ads, and it's just doing its own thing at this point.
And then the question why it isn't working,
exactly,
and it's like, well, yeah. So now more than ever, companies are using SEO practices to drive traffic to their websites, but now that a lot of companies are, what practices can companies use in terms of SEO to, now that all their competitors are kind of doing the same thing?
That's a good question. There's no like magic bullet. Ultimately, you're not going to do something that suddenly jumps you up, or something that no one else has thought of. It's really unlikely. The main thing is making sure you're hitting all the best practices, doing everything right as much as you can. And then it's things like making sure your content is the best it can be. That's probably the best way you could level up above someone else, is being even better than them with the content and things that you're putting out there. Other than that, you're getting into like really granular things like having a few more links, or your domain's a little bit older, or your website's loading point something seconds faster than someone else's. Like it's not necessarily directly quantifiable to be like, well, if I do this, this is going to happen, kind of thing. It's it's very much like, you know what you should do and you know the best practices, but to get ahead of someone else is a constant battle. So there's no real answer to that question, like that you can exactly say, well, if you do this, you'll beat someone out. It really is just making sure you're on top of it as much as you can be. Doing it constantly, working on things constantly, self-evaluating, and actually being really self-critical as well. You need to be looking at your site, looking at your competitors' sites, and see what they're doing, using tools or just using your own knowledge as well when you look through the sites and it's really common for people to like look at the competitors and be like, well, I'm doing this and I'm way better than them as a business, so why am I not at the top? Like, it's just that's not the way it works. You have to really look at the other sites and be like, well, they're doing this, look what they're doing well, look at the things that they're doing better than you, and try and do even better than that effectively.
So in terms of like blogs and news updates on sites to kind of drive, from an SEO point of view, to drive traffic to sites, I think companies now are more in tune with that sort of practice now, whereas I think before SEO was a bit of a like, oh well, what's that kind of, you will just put a few keywords into our site and do a couple of blogs, and I suppose on some sides you had blogs that were written and they just put a few keywords in there and they think, oh well, that's it, that's what you do, and that's it. But then other side where blogs were written and they pack them with like all these keywords and it wouldn't make sense. Obviously that wasn't a good experience for the reader. But I think now companies are really understanding about sort of blog writing and SEO practices and the experience for for the reader.
Yeah.
And then obviously Google likes that.
Yeah, ultimately it's about the user. It has to
Yeah.
be for the user first, SEO second. Search engines are not the priority. You should be doing things that's best for the person that's going to read your actual content or look at your site or you know, view you on the web. It's about like integrating your PR as well. Any like smart kind of campaigns you can do that are going to generate more buzz around your business and more links and more conversations, etc. It's all about that kind of stuff as well. So that's, you know, for something that's a more, I can't think of a better word for it, but a dull kind of service-based business maybe, that's a lot more challenging. Whereas if you've got like a cool product or something, it's about thinking how can you get that in front of people and get people talking and get buzz surrounding that, and then that will naturally help the search
and then
engine
they
stuff.
will link to your site potentially.
Yeah, it's all part of it. It all feeds into it. So yeah.
And that can be quite a complex thing, can't it? So kind of seeing all those sort of like touch points and kind of understanding how that impacts how to drive traffic to the site, and there's a lot of sort of context and thought around it.
Yeah, definitely.
How does Google reward brands if web users are happy, and how does it know?
That's a changing landscape, I suppose. You know, 10 years ago you could just have loads of links to your site and that was like social authority effectively. Google thought, well, if everyone's linking to you then they're effectively endorsing you, and quickly realised that just isn't true. So links are like still a value, but so many other things are now more important than they were. Like your content and your on-page stuff is just way more important than it ever used to be. But the landscape changes constantly, so it's like socials obviously become a huge thing in the past 10 years where it wasn't back then. So like people linking through social and things like that have to play into it. They have to be a factor because that's literally is a social endorsement to what you're doing. So it's things like that, and browser technology changes, the web changes, websites change, mobiles are more important now than ever. So like making sure your website works perfectly on mobile is almost more important than a desktop at this point for a lot of companies. And Google's aware of that, so those rules are constantly changing, which can make things difficult because if you don't keep up to date with it, then you're not aware of these things. But yeah, it's there. They don't reveal exactly how they rank things or the weight of things. So people have to do experiments and figure things out over time as to what is actually like the most important things you can do. And it is just constantly changing. So it's like there's no right or wrong answer to it. There's no best practice. There's best practices, but they're only ultimately they're guesses. Google occasionally comes out and says, you know, you should be doing this or whatever, or makes things a little bit obvious, but it's all a bit of a mystery as to how the algorithm works, and I'm sure it's changing literally constantly. Like daily it'll be changing, and then they do major updates every kind of few months or whatever. So it's, who knows where it'll go. I think with stuff like AI, like that might become more of a thing as well. The way that they, because effectively Google can only read the code on a site. It's only looking at the code. It's not looking at the image necessarily, but then maybe it will at some point. Maybe it will literally be looking at the image in a sense, and looking at these things that it can at the moment. Do
you think ultimately companies need to think about the user experience?
Oh yeah,
more
absolutely.
Than anything.
Yeah. At the end of the day, if you're building your site and you're doing your content and you're doing everything right for the user, you're making your site fast, you're writing answers to questions that people are looking for, you're making a good experience for the user on phone, whatever device they're using, that is going to be the best thing. So and that protects you, because if Google makes changes, yes, sometimes these like nasty techniques where you have spammy location pages and these things, they do sometimes work, but ultimately long term, if you're doing the right thing for your user, then that is going to tick the boxes, and the stuff Google's going to do, they want they want people to want to use Google so they can sell you ads,
Yeah.
so they can sell ads on the platform. So ultimately, they want the experience to be the best as they can for the user, because that is going to keep people coming back and therefore keep people clicking and spending money in the whole ad thing churning. So it's within their interest to make sure it's good for the user. So that is always going to be at the front of their minds when they're making these changes.
Yeah.
So yeah, ultimately do it for the user.
Yeah.
Worry about search engines second, I would say.
And I think as well, you know, it's obviously good to think about keeping Google happy, but really, you know, you should be customer first every time, because, you know, that's who you're serving, and obviously you want to take them down that sort of funnel to eventually purchase. So you know, that should be the main focus anyway. And yes, if you can keep Google happy along you know, that process, then it's only going to benefit the company ultimately anyway, isn't it? Yeah.
And if you go too far the other way and you're too focused on SEO and making sure everything's completely SEO'd and whatnot, like, you're just going to fall into traps. Like, it's going to be crap for the user, and you're probably going to overstep your bounds and maybe even get punished for doing some things that you think are a little bit grey area kind of thing. So
yeah, and I think it like affects the level, potentially the level of creativity that goes into a site as well, because if you're thinking about it from a real technical sort of Google pleasing point of view, then it may sway your sort of level of that user experience, but exploring creative ways to engage the customer and make the process nice for them.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, then we did that with our own new latest site. Like, we had to put the SEO to a side almost, because we wanted something that was a little bit different. The flow of the site is a little bit abnormal, and wanted it to be engaging and look interesting and cool ultimately, because that is what's going to bring you business, not necessarily just ticking boxes for a search engine. Like, so and I think as well as that becomes more common, like, Google's going to have to adapt to the way it recognizes signals, because if, you know, it's quite rigid and you must do this way kind of thing, and if you follow that from a purely technical perspective, like you say, you are going to damage creativity, and that is not necessarily going to be the best answer for the customer. Like, the customer might want to see the more cool creative thing, not the more boring rigid thing. So it's going to have to change in line with that as that becomes more normal.
And I think from a brand point of view, and actually just what the customer kind of needs, and obviously the business needs, it needs to position itself and stand out different from competitors. So if you are kind of very sort of in that mindset of pleasing Google, then it's hard to offer the customer something different in terms of look and feel and that experience.
It goes back to the question that you asked earlier. It's like, what if everyone's doing it? How do you stand out? Well, you can't. If you're all ticking the same boxes that we're being told to tick, then you're all going to be the same, aren't you? You're going to be a mirror of one another. So, like, you've got to sometimes step out of that and do something different to stand out.
And do you think that's why sort of like Google doesn't really sort of like set out, you must do this in order to rank high?
You could game the system, couldn't you, really? You just follow the list and go, right, done. But keeping it sort of like unknown, it sort of it helps people explore that level of creativity and doing things different. And then keeping people sort of just playing the game, I guess. Yeah, it would be a dangerous like monopolization of the internet if they were to dictate exactly how your site should be. It
just wouldn't work.
It wouldn't work. No. So we'll see. I think things are constantly changing, and ultimately do things for the user, and then you'll be in the right place.
So the first thing I was going to talk about is, now that we've had a few months to digest and use it, Threads. Remember Threads? So Threads is basically Twitter on Instagram. And I feel like when it first came out, everyone was like, yeah, this is amazing, Twitter shit, yeah, it's going to be amazing, and I can't wait to use Threads. And then I don't feel like anyone uses it anymore, which is kind of what I thought might happen, because it's just repeating Twitter or X, whatever. Well, I suppose it is X at the moment. So, do you think there's any legs to it? Do you think it's dead? Do you think it can be salvaged? Because I've noticed on Instagram now when I go on Instagram, there's like the odd threads like thing, but I just scroll past it because I don't care.
Yeah.
But it's not all about me. It's like, what do you think?
I think because you've got Zuck behind it, it's a big corporation. It's within their interest to keep doubling down, and they've got the money to blur on trying to get it to work. Well, like Instagram, when it got stories, I remember that was like copying off Snapchat, wasn't it? And everyone was like, oh,
look
at that. And now look at it. No one gives a shit about Snapchat stories,
dead.
And everyone looks at Instagram stories.
I think it's dead, but
no, it still has a place. But they can invest and keep going and try and integrate it in. The only thing with Threads that's a bit weird is like the people that I follow on Instagram are not necessarily people that I want to see like text-based stuff from.
Yeah.
So it's like
because I follow people on Threads and like it's like it's all visual stuff on Instagram, innit? So I want to see like pictures of like toys, for example.
I got like follow like a pizza
toys.
account. Or
something.
Well, I don't want to see what pizza has to say on Threads.
It's
just
like,
don't give a shit about it.
Here's the latest ingredients for my latest pizza that I did. It's like, oh yeah, great.
It's a visual thing. Like you follow things based on them being a visual thing, not necessarily a text-based thing. So there is. I feel like there's a bit of a conflict there of the way it operates in that sense. But
and like I saw a lot of people go, like on LinkedIn, so we've never seen a growth on any social media platform. Yeah, but you've grown. It's artificial growth because it's just basically adding all Instagram followers to a new social platform.
Yeah.
But are they even the right? Like, are they even the right audience and the right users to use that like platform natively and use it properly? I think that could almost be a problem for it, based on just that conversation that we've had there.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got the money behind it to keep going, and maybe they'll integrate it in like a weird way that we're not thinking of, or even if it's like within Instagram and you just swipe across and there's a section that's Threads, and you just like that would make things a lot easier. In the same way you have the like Reels, I feel like slowly gaining a bit more popularity again. TikTok obviously brought that in, Instagram copied. Everyone's like, I don't want that in Instagram, and now it's like starting to become a thing because Reels are more normal posts on Instagram now, and Instagram's doing more like vertical video in its general feed. So it's like gradually these things are starting to kind of work. So it's like if you did have a separate page that was just Threads and you could just swipe across to it and you're already in the app, it's a really low barrier to just like and then you keep like scrolling and maybe take an interest in it. So like that's a way. I don't know, there's probably other things that I'm not thinking of as well that could work.
It also very much depends on what Twitter does, or X. I feel like a lot of the stuff that Elon's done so far with Twitter, I've been like, yeah, fair enough. Like I can see like he's trying, but the whole X thing, I'm just like, why would you dump one of the world's biggest brands and call it one letter? Like I just don't. From a marketing perspective, and even just from a technological, I just don't understand that. Unless he's got some grand plan.
Well, the grand plan is X is the all-in-one app, isn't it? In the same way that China has WeChat. And everyone does everything through WeChat. They shop through WeChat. They check into things through WeChat. They order food through WeChat. It's this one app that started as a chat app that's grown into this literal, like, the app of China. That's what he wants for X, is to be the one app. So it's called X. But it is weird. But I suppose you're of that. It's so big that you can just change the name, and everyone, as they are doing, is still calling it Twitter. Some people are calling it X. Gradually, I'm seeing more people call it X. It's like...
like people are changing on their website, we've noticed. Like a lot of people changing icons on the website.
Happen, So it's like... it's such a big thing that you don't need to almost worry about brand recognition because everyone just uses it regardless of what it's called.
It's true.
So but it seems purely like ideological rather than like strategic almost. I would say the name change.
This is a left field question which I don't really know how it'll go, but I'll ask it anyway. So you're obviously massive gamer, always have been, and I have liked games and played games like computer. We're talking about computer games here. Since I was probably 5 years old, so the majority of my life. And I think it's been quite a big part of our lives, like me and you growing up and stuff. We played a lot of games together and stuff. So at the moment, I'm seeing like there's a rise of like handhelds, like Steam Deck, and you've got a ROG Ally. Is that what it's called? So I think although it's not necessarily to do with marketing, it's still to do with technology, because they're kind of interlinked. Do you think now there is a move to less kind of console and more like handheld? And do we think maybe handheld gaming and devices, like powerful handheld devices, are eventually going to make kind of consoles obsolete? That's a very dramatic way of putting it. I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
Well, it kind of started. It was been around for a long time, hasn't it? But it started again with the Switch as like a console that you can take with you.
Yeah.
Technology's reaching a point where like there's a lot of investment into mobile chipsets on like phones, particularly phones driving that, I would say.
Yeah.
So it's like power efficient, but still powerful chips. I mean, look at the stuff Apple's doing in the chip space. Like some of their stuff's really, really good. So like it's become more of a capable thing, whereas before the difference was vast. The gap was huge, and that gap's like shrunk from a power perspective.
I even think the gap between, like for example, between PS4 and PS5, like in comparison to like PS1 and PS2, which was like whoa, or even going further back like Mega Drive to PlayStation, that was like 2D to 3D pretty much.
Yeah, well you've had 2D to 3D, which is a massive transition. Then you've had like the invention or the growth of HD, and that was a big jump. SD to HD. Now you've got HD to 4K or whatever. It's not as stark of a jump.
Yeah.
So like I think that's just the maturity of technology. Like it's just not as much of a jump anymore.
Yeah. But I think that's really interesting, because it's like how much further can they actually push it now? Because I feel like when you're looking at like a game like Starfield that's just come out, that people I thought the concept of it is absolutely amazing, and I've seen it on your incredible home rig, and it just looks amazing. I think I could lose a lot of time in that. But then when I'm looking at the reviews of it and what people's perception of it, it's just it's like, is there a bit of like fatigue in? Because if you could imagine a game like Starfield like 15 years ago, play something like that, everyone would be like, that is like, I've never played anything like that before. That is mind blowing. Now it's like, yeah, it's all right. Even though it pushes so many boundaries and does so many things, and it's so vast, and you could literally lose your life in it. It's like, have we reached some kind of tipping point where maybe it's not the technology and maybe it's back to kind of like storytelling and all that type of thing?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, that's a separate conversation, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
But like going back to handheld stuff, I think you're hitting a point where you can have a portable system that you can put on the TV and it can still look decent.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technologies happening with upscaling techniques are huge at the moment. So like you can take something that's like 720p and put it in 4K and it looks like decent. Doesn't look the same as native 4K, but the technologies on these things, like, they're looking good. And then you also, that same technology, the same kind of area of technology, they're moving into like frame generation as well. So you can take like 30 FPS and make it 60 FPS, or like 60 to 120 or whatever. And that kind of thing's like quite a big thing as well. So you can be running a game at a lower frame rate, but then playing it at a higher frame rate, or what feels like a higher frame rate. There's a lot of push in that area, and that all lends itself really well to portable systems as well. Because you can have lower power systems that can be upscaling and frame generation, doing all these things. So that then at a standard that feels very close to, but not quite the same as like your high end stuff. So I feel like there is a push on that in that space, and particularly like the Windows side has not really been explored, or the PC side has not been. It's always been like Nintendo's lockdown system, or you know, PlayStation have tried as well and failed. But like,
PlayStation handhelds.
I think like your PC side, PC gaming's remained pretty strong. In fact, it's probably in a bit of a resurgence period with things like Twitch and stuff. So like, I feel like having your PC library and taking that portable is like quite an attractive thing. It's not some people do it with laptops, but like playing a game on a laptop, it's a bit of shit, isn't it? Really?
Yeah, it is,
It's bulky. It's not a very great way to do it. Whereas if you've literally just got this thing that you're just playing a game and you can plop it in.
Well, that's what I think.
TV, like,
surely, if that develops so much, then I feel like the majority of people will have a handheld device that they can play on the sofa, or when they're not in front of the telly, or when someone's doing something else. And then also, if they want a bigger experience, they can plop it in the TV, like you said, and get a controller and play it like that.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I think it's appealing, and I think Nintendo's next console is going to be everything points to the Switch 2 or whatever they call it. I don't know, but like they're going down that route still. I think Microsoft are interested in the handheld space. There's rumours that they're going to do like a portable Windows, not create a system, but make Windows work better on a portable, because at the moment it doesn't. So stuff like that, like there's clearly eyes and interest and money going into that space, but then people like me are always going to want to play things at like the highest quality on the best system. Like you're still going to want that like powerful performance.
And I think with PC stuff as well, there's that element of customization where you build in it yourself, and like you can get everything that you want to the spec that you want.
To some degree, yeah. But then I think as well, like everything's going like cloud based as well. You've got like cloud saves, particularly Xbox and PC. You've got Steam. You save sync to Steam instantly. So if you then take your system with you, you can then just fire up the same save wherever you are, kind of thing, as long as you've got internet. And it's the same with Xbox. If I play a game on one Xbox, turn it off, fire up my ROG Ally, literally I can play like the same save synced now on a portable. That kind of stuff's really big. PlayStation are not doing that much at the moment, and Nintendo obviously don't, other than the Switch itself, but you're seeing that in the PC space quite a lot. So I feel like there's more. It's maybe not necessarily a push of like handhelds replacing the home console, but more like complementing the home console is the way I see it more. Is like complementing that space.
It's done it better than ever before, because like you've got your PS Vita where you could do that.
Yeah.
And that was just really bad. Trying to play a PlayStation game on the PS Vita, like streaming it on that, because the screen was just too small. It just didn't work.
Yeah, I think it'll complement stuff. I don't think it'll replace it. Because you're still always going to want to have that performance, and the gap is still big from that perspective.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting area. I find it really interesting at the moment.
Playing Starfield on like my 7-inch screen looks great. The moment that I dock it, seeing rough edges there doesn't look great. Yeah. Whereas when I'm playing it on my like premium home console, like it looks great. Although it don't run great, but it looks great.
Yeah.
So.
Did you say premium home console because you didn't want to brand that? Oh. So lastly, you're going off on paternity soon. Second baby.
Yeah.
The first with Rory, it was during it was one of the lockdowns, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I think it was the final full lockdown that Britain had.
Yeah, so the second lockdown, I think.
So that was.
But he was throughout that period was during the main lockdown, like.
Yeah.
The not when he existed, but when he was growing.
Yeah. So that must have been quite difficult, to be fair. But I suppose after now having 2.5 years of experience of having a child, and obviously doing one paternity leave, is there any lessons that you've probably learned that you might do this time that you did differently from last time, and balancing, and because I personally did my second paternity a lot different.
I think making sure I take enough time to spend is really important, particularly because it's looking like it'll go down the more major surgery route. So that's like a worse recovery period, and being there to support, especially with another child, is really important. I feel like because it just doesn't feel right to be like, right, I know you've literally had your stomach cut up, and I know it's been only a few weeks ago, and I know there's a toddler that keeps asking you to like carry him and stuff, but I'm going to work.
Yeah,
See you
yeah,
later.
yeah. It's ridiculous when you think of it like that.
So,
I think first time you pulled though, aren't you? You pulled in so many directions. Like I should have definitely had that mindset like first time around, but I was just pulled in the opposite direction to keep the business running so that we could afford to like live at the same time. There's that. But I know we've got more support now I think as well.
We do, yeah, and actually I think it's a positive of COVID is like working from home and that remote working is in the same way handheld gaming console complements.
Nice callback there.
Complements of end console. You can work remotely.
Yeah.
But like, especially when you run your own business, and I do feel more accepting of this being a thing generally throughout work is you could do like a few hours here.
Yeah,
you don't have to do a full day.
Yeah.
You know, if you solve this big job that needs sorting,
yeah.
then boom, that's fine.
It probably should be a staggered return, shouldn't it? It shouldn't just be like straight back into it. It just doesn't. That's gonna cause problems, isn't it? It's not right for your family, I don't think.
So like obviously because you run a business, like I can't just switch off to it fully, but I do. No. I'm going to switch off fully for a little bit, and then as that time goes on and I'm a bit more comfortable again, it's like I can just hop on my laptop for an hour because she's asleep or whatever. Like I can just do that, and that'll be fine.
Yeah, because then you'll come back to work like more motivated as well and wanting to kind of crack on rather than just feeling quite stressed and drained.
Yeah, unless like you just like gone away for a complete dark for like 3 weeks or whatever, and you come back and it's like all these emails, millions of emails and all this shit, and you're like, ugh. So it's like if you can chip away at stuff but do it in a way that's quite relaxed and you just do it when you have the chance to, like I feel like that is going to be a much different approach that I didn't really do the first time.
Yeah.
So I mean we've got like home working setups now. We've like got it all rigged up. It's really easy just to hop on. So that is a big difference.
Yeah, I think that has made a huge difference in one positive of a worldwide global pandemic that locks the majority of the world down all at once. That we have become to accept a more kind of flexible way of working. For some professions, we're in one of those where we're sat in an office and we can do that. We just need a computer. You can't do it if you like work in a restaurant or you're a bin man or something like that. It just doesn't exist.
Yeah, although it's not great for creativity. Like it's good to have conversations, about creative things.
Yeah,
but
it
there are
spontaneous.
There are some jobs. It's like it's not one rule for everything. It's like there are some things that you just want to crack on your own and can easily do that remotely. There are some things that you need to work collaboratively that work better when you're in person. That's just literally, it's not black and white. Like there is intricacies to it.
Yeah.